Yo, what is up guys, and welcome back to another one of my Epic 7 tier lists for you guys today. And today we're going to be talking about 3-star units and how they rank for PVE. So yes, this will not take into account any PvP at all. This will be strictly for PvE content, and this is going to encompass basically everything in general. So we're not going to be talking about one area of content such as like hunts or abyss in specific, or rate them higher because they're better in hunts or something like that. This is just going to be a overall assessment of how the units are. So we're going to be separating these units into 5 tiers here. We have the S tier. These units you'll use a lot, pretty much everywhere in so many areas of content. You're going to need to build them ASAP. You're going to want to keep them built for a long time because you will be using these units frequently, even into the late game as you're farming content. Next, we have the A tier units. These units are still very good. You can use them in a decent amount of content as well. They're going to be a little bit more niche than the S tier units. I'm not gonna lie. The S tier units are kind of on a tier of their own, but the A tier units are still very good. You can slot them into a lot of areas of content, and maybe they're not good in too many areas of content, but the ones they are in, they're going to be very strong. For the B tier units, these units will be a step down, but they're still very good. You're going to use them mostly for 1 or 2 areas of content, but they're going to be super strong there. C tier units, these units are going to be used in maybe 1 area of content, but even though they're able to be used there, they'll be able to be replaced by other units, but they're still nonetheless usable. And then the D tier units, guys, these units are D for doo-doo. Please do not use these units. Maybe there are 1 or 2 or 3 units that you can use in certain areas of content, such as like Abyss Challenge Mode and stuff like that, but there's so many other replacements you can use. And these units are honestly not really designed well for PvE. They definitely are outdated or need buffs or need specialty change ASAP. So yeah, starting with the S tier units, should be no surprise. We have Adventure Ross, right? One of the best knights in the game for PvE because he has a Dispel on his S1. He has a defense buff, which is very powerful for PvE, so your team doesn't get one shot. If you can time his S3 with boss's ultimate abilities, you can survive it very easily. He can also hold Aureus, and he also has a dual attack with a defense break built in that brings the ally with the highest attack, making him one of the best knights, if not the best knight for PvE in the game. Next, we have Angelic Montmorency, very good cleanser. She has constant cleansing with her S2, only a 2-turn cooldown, sometimes no cooldown if you actually roll lucky with her skill tree. And for her S3, she has that very powerful heal and immunity buff, which you can soul burn for your entire team to make it so you can immune some special effects from some bosses. Very powerful, best cleanser in the game. You definitely want to have her built and have her ready to go because you will use her all the time in raid, especially for Nightmare Raid. You're going to have to pull her out at least once, or I guess at most once, right? Because you can only use her in Nightmare Raid once, but she's still very good. You can use her in Wyvern, you can use her in Expeditions, you can use her in Abyss. You will use her in Abyss in a lot of floors. You can use her in Adventure. She's just very powerful. Honestly, I don't think she's as powerful as she was when the game first released, but she's still very strong. Next, we have Commander Lorena, one of the best single target units in the game because she has no debuffs, and a lot of bosses actually punish debuffs. She also is element neutral, being a dark unit, and even though she's a dark unit, you can still get her from connections, which makes her free to play. And also, she does a ton of damage with her S1, and her S2 gives her scaling damage, right? She's also very good in hunt one-shot, so you can use her in general PvE, in like hunts, you can use her in expeditions, you can use her in Abyss, you will use her in Abyss a lot, and you can also use her in the late game once you actually get all your gear and all your content cleared for hunt one-shots for Katie's. She's very good there. She is one of the best free-to-play options there, and her gear requirements aren't that high for Katie's one-shot. Next, we have Terranor Guard, or otherwise known as Terranor God. This guy is super broken for Abyss and also for Expedition, especially Fire Expedition, because he abuses dual attack. So usually you run him with a team like Aros, who has a dual attack, and Tamarin, who has another force dual attack, and Kitty Clarissa, who has another force dual attack. And he can cheese a lot of the Abyss floors that are meant to be very hard because he will just lap the boss over and over, even with 0 speed. Very powerful. If you guys haven't tested him out in Abyss yet and you're struggling on like 108 and higher, he is going to save your butt. He is super strong. Just run him in the team comp that I mentioned, and he will carry you through Abyss. And he's still usable in like Expedition. He's one of the best units for Ice Expedition or Fire Expedition as well. Next, we have Aiden, guys. So just to preface, we're going to be keeping the units that have specialty changes that aren't specialty changed off. So for example, we have like Montmorency here. I'm not going to put on the list at all because you should just have Angelic Montmorency. And for Aiden, we're just going to assume that it's basically all the forms of her in one because you can switch back and forth. And to be honest, you're going to keep Aiden at the light version Savior Aiden for pretty much the entire game because Savior Aiden's so strong in PvP. But you can also switch to other forms, right? You can switch her to ice, you can switch her to earth, you can switch her to fire as much as you want. It's really up to you, and if you do decide to switch her, she'll be very good in PvE. And honestly, her light version is still pretty good as well because of the sheer damage that she can output. But she's very good in some Abyss Wars. All of the specs of Aiden are good in Expedition for their respective elements. So if you're using Earth Aiden, she's going to be good in Ice Expedition, right? Fire Aiden will be good in Earth, and etc. She's also good in the hunts. She is probably the best free-to-play unit that is going to be able to be, used in multiple areas of content. Now, switching through specs does take some resources because you have to farm the material to actually switch her element. But besides that, she's still a very good unit. If you're new to the game and you're lacking a very, very powerful Earth TPS, you can just use her in the Earth form for a while until you get into PvP, and then switch her to Savior Aiden, the Light form. If you're lacking a good Ice DPS, you can use the Ice version of Aiden for a while, and so forth. So, pretty good unit, definitely very strong. I think she was kind of designed to be very, very strong because she is the free-to-play main character that you get for episode 4. Now we're going to the A tier units. Like I said, these units aren't as universal, but they're still very, very good. So Inos 2.0, very good attack buffer and support. She can actually heal as well because she's a Soul Weaver if you have her on Celestine, a 5-star artifact. But she's very good because there's going to be some areas of content where you can't use too many non-attack skills because you get punished. And Inos is the perfect Soul Weaver for that because she can support your team while being able to hold a healing artifact in Celestine to actually heal your team. So very, very good. She has an attack buff and a speed buff. Two of the best buffs in the game, so you definitely want to make sure you do have her specialty change done because there's going to be some areas of content where you want to use her, especially like Nightmare Raid and some Abyss Floors. But even in areas of content where you're trying to do as much damage as possible, such as like Ancient Inheritance, she's going to be very, very good there. Kiris, guys, so you guys probably know, if you guys don't, she's going to be one of the best units for Abyss because she can cheese a lot of floors with her poison because poisons do % max HP damage of bosses. So your poisons can literally do like 50k, 60k, even like 200k damage return depending on how many stacks you have. So very, very good. You can use her with like Dizzy if you pulled her from Guilty Gear, or with Spectani for more poisons, and very, very powerful. Unbound Knight AOL doesn't really excel in any area of content except for areas of content where you need a Dispel because she has a Dispel in her S1 and her S3, but she's very good because, and in the A tier, pretty high up because she has a lot of mitigation, right? She has Escort, she has Adamant Shield, and she just has a barrier for your team as well. She can even stun some key ads or bosses, not bosses, but the mobs around them, like mini bosses as well, that have important skills to stop. And she also has that Dispel, which is very good against like Queen, and there's going to be a lot of bosses that have constant buffs that keep ramping up, which makes it so that she's pretty good. Falcon and Clury, also very good as a knight. She is probably going to be tied with Arrowell below Aros because she does have a strip. All the knights, the top 3 knights, have Dispels and strips, but she also has a very consistent defense buff, or defense break on her S3, and she also has healing from her S2 and CR pushing for her team. The only thing is she is pretty squishy, and also she doesn't have as much mitigation compared to the other knights. She has healing, but healing isn't as good as mitigation in some areas of content because the bosses hit way too hard, whereas Aros has a defense buff, and Unbound Knight has that barrier and also has Adamant Shield on top of Escort. But Falcon and Clury is still very good for Ice Expo. You can use her for Banshee. She can actually solo Banshee. I have a video on her soloing Banshee if you guys are looking to get your Dagger Sakaar done. And she's also pretty good in some Raid and Abyss as well. Next we have Camilla. Very, very good for Hunt's one-shot setup because she has a forced dual attack. You can also use her instead of Kitty Clarissa if you don't have her in Abyss, instead of Kitty Clarissa if you're running that Terranor Guard comp, because Kitty Clarissa is pretty hard to get. She's a 4-star ML, and honestly 4-star MLs are pretty hard to get, pretty comparable to 5-star MLs. Not to that extreme, but they're definitely, going to be more difficult than 5-star RGVs sometimes because they don't really have dedicated banners, right? But Camilla, very good in Hunt one-shot setup for Katie's. Azumnak, you can use her in a lot of areas of content as well, so I think she's pretty good, and she also does pretty decent damage as well and has an attack buff. Now B tier units, we're going to talk about these units very, very quickly. These units are still very good. We'll talk about where they are good in. They're only going to be good in like 1 or 2 areas of content. So Mercenary Helga, guys, she's very good in Ice Expedition. She's also good in Ancient Inheritance. You can also use her in Katie's. She's very good. But besides that, you're not going to really use her too much. She does get phased out once you get to the super late game or late game. But in the mid game, she's a very good defense breaker, very consistent. If you guys are looking for a consistent single target damage dealer that has defense break, Mercenary Helga is for you. She's very, very strong in that regard. Next we have Lilka. She's very good for Banshee one-shot. I think people use her for a lot of one-shot comps actually because she has that CR push in her S2 with attack buff. She is a new unit, so maybe she will be better in more areas of content and will rank higher. But from what I've seen, she is somewhat replaceable in those one-shot comps, although she does lower the gear requirements quite a bit. But she's still very good. I think she's definitely worth checking out if you're looking to get into one-shot comps and try to look for more updated comps with Lilka. I'll probably be posting a video with Lilka featured, showing her how strong she actually is. Next we have Mascot Hazel. Honestly, if you have her in a full fire team, she's like S tier. But just overall, since we're talking about it overall, and honestly, you're not going to really have a full fire team early game because I guess you can, right? Because you can run Aros, her, Bomb Model Kana, and then whatever. But the thing is, she is not really going to be that much better than Tamarin. Tamarin is still very good, but Tamarin does have that Dispel, which makes her very invaluable. But for pure damage dealing and for pure like cleansing and cycling and healing even, Mascot Hazel will be better than Tamarin. It's just that Tamarin does have that AoE Dispel and that AoE Cleanse at will with their S3 idle form. But Mascot Hazel does have that greater attack buff, which can make her do more damage in longer fights in a full fire team. Next up we have Hasol. She's very good for Nightmare Queen. You can actually use her in bosses with a lot of dual attacks, or not dual attacks, counter attacks. She's very good there because she can do decent damage. But mostly going to be used for Nightmare Queen. She's super good there. She makes it so easy. If you're struggling with Nightmare Queen, just level up your Hasol, use her there, and she'll make it a breeze. Summoner Disciple Alexa. So Alexa, very good for Wyvern 13, even before her specialty change. But now after her specialty change, she does even more damage, and she can actually one-shot the boss. So definitely worth checking out if you don't want to use your cigarette for some reason, or you don't have access to Rem anymore. Summoner's Disciple Alexa, very, very good. If you want to use her as a one-shotter, she's pretty decent there. Yui, also for Summoner Disciple Alexa, even if you don't one-shot Wyvern, she's better than Yui because she does faster runs. I think Yui's better for beginners. Summoner Disciple Alexa is better for speeding up your runs because she hits a lot harder than Yui does. Very comparable to Cigarette, even hits harder than Cigarette in the early game until you get better gear on your Cigarette. But Alexa is very good because she hits twice with her S1, which will activate Daydream Joker, one of the best artifacts for PvE, twice in one turn, which is very, very powerful. Next we have Mui. If you're new to the game, you probably understand why he's so good because he makes Wyvern so easy. You guys might wonder why I don't have him a lot higher, like A or even S, because he's so good for you guys that are new to the game for Wyvern. The thing is, he's only used in Wyvern, so that's the only area of content you'll use him. That's why I can't put him higher. He is very good there for beginners, and eventually you will stop using him even as a mid-game, late-game player in Wyvern because his damage isn't that great, and you're way better off using Alexa over him or even SSB to speed up your runs, right? SSB will speed up your first wave. Even the boss will go a lot faster because SSB has target and has an extra defense break that is way more consistent than Mui's, and you also will have Alexa, who just does a ton of damage to the boss, right? So Mui, very good, will make your tank live a lot easier for Wyvern, and honestly, definitely you want to build him no matter what for the early game because he lowers the gear requirements, but after a while you're going to realize that you can replace him and speed up your runs eventually pretty quickly actually. C tier units, these units are not going to be used that much, probably one area of content maybe, but they can be switched out, so we'll talk about them very quickly and where you can use them. Lena can be used in Fire Expedition, she's pretty good there, and for fodder farming and adventure, and for Wyvern. Lucy, very good for Banshee one-shot, although not as good anymore because Furious got an exclusive equipment that gives him restrict, so Lucy isn't the only one that can restrict the boss now, right? Furious can also give your team crit chance buff, so, although you can use Lucy, like, Furious is just a lot better now. Yunmyang, she's good for Katie's, that's pretty much it. Captain Rickarus, good for Azumnak and also for Katie's. That's pretty much it, but like these units can be replaced by other units and they're not as good as the replacements, to be honest. Jet can be used for Banshee, but that's pretty much it as well. He does have decent cleansing, but Amomo is just way better. And the only reason why you even bring him to Banshee because you need a lot of cleansing, right? So you bring Amomo with him and he's just the worst version of Amomo. So yeah, Zealot Carmen Rose, very good for Light Expedition, pretty much it as well. Use Rima. I think she's very niche. Honestly, if you build a team around her, I think she can be like B or A. She does reduce skill cooldowns by 2 turns, so it's not a full reset like a Saria, but it still can be very good against units with very short cooldowns, right? So definitely something you can play around with. I know people, like to use him with teams that need a lot of healing because what you can do is, chain your healing with Rima and have him reset him, I think, right? He's a he. He can reset the cooldown of your healing abilities and get like a full burst of healing. You can also use him with a unit like Kiris to give her more S2s and S3s in Abyss. But for the most part, you know, very niche. It's going to be very hard to use him because you need a specific team comp around him in a specific area of content. Shadow Knight Pillis, she's mostly here because she has damage mitigation, defense buff, and Aureus. That's pretty much it. Provokes are very useless in PvE though, so she's just a walking meat shield. If you're going to use her, you might as well use Aros, right? Because he has that defense buff, but he also has a lot more. Next we have Chaos Inquisitor. Pretty good in Earth Expedition, I believe. But besides that, not really used. Magic Scholar Doris, not really used anywhere in PvE, but the thing is, she is a decent soul weaver with a lot of healing, so you can use her if you really want to, but I just don't really see a reason you should. But I'm going to put her in the C tier because technically, yes, you can use her and she'll do fine, but soul weavers are very, very strong in PvE, and she's probably one of the weaker ones for PvE, if not one of the weakest. We have Ian. Ian has that attack buff, so pretty decent. He also has some debuffs in his S3, so he technically can be used in Wyvern, but I don't know why you'd ever use him unless you're doing like a 3-star only account challenge. So yeah, I'll put him in the C tier because attack buffs are good. But yeah, D tier units, like you guys can see, I don't think any of these units are really used anywhere. Maybe some can be used in some areas of content, right? Sure, I'm sure some people use Adley and like Banshee because they're crazy. I'm sure Christie's used in bosses with a lot of debuffs where you want to protect one unit and you want to give them a lot of effect resistor. And I'm sure like Mirsa is used against bosses where you want to dodge a lot. Like, yeah, there's a lot of areas of content. Like I even know Helen can be used for Wyvern and stuff like that. It's just that there's no real point in talking about them because you only will use them just to have fun and to have a challenge for yourself. This is a tier list for, you know, pure, you know, viability. So yeah, that's why I didn't include them on the list. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this tier list though, guys. If you guys disagree, let me know in the comments down below. You guys are free to disagree with me. It is just my own opinion and I want to know what you guys think because I always take these things into account for my future tier list because I update these tier lists a couple of times a year because meta shifts a lot even for PvE because as new units get released, a lot of units will get power crept, right? And as new content gets released, units will get better. Like before this, Samool was like D tier, right? But because of Nightmare Queen, she's instantly up to B tier because that area of content is very hard. One of the hardest PvE contents in the game, and she makes it super, super easy. Lilka wasn't a unit back then, but now she's in the game. She's B tier, right? She makes one-shot hunts a lot more usable, and same with Camilla, right? So a lot of examples of new units changing up the meta for PvE even. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys next time.